Welcome to episode 16 of the Goldenberg Destiny Project. I'd like to talk about that time in the early part of the second millennium before Common Era. That means from about 2000 BCE till about 1500 BCE. Talk about that period. What was going on in that period in the world? So at that time, the imperial quadrant was in the eastern part of the Mediterranean basin. Anything beyond there was really not part of the imperial quadrant yet. There was, in Greece, there was Mycenaean civilization, which was really nothing special. And the Romans didn't even appear yet, and the Etruscans were primitive. These were just not, that's not yet part of the imperial quadrant. In the imperial quadrant, we have three major empires, three major civilizations, vital, dynamic civilizations that are growing and building and developing. We have the Mesopotamian, the Mesopotamian empires, which really shifts back and forth between Assyria and Babylonia, and the Elamites, who are the forerunners of the Persians, and they all vie for power, and power shifts from one to the other. But in general, there's one general development in Mesopotamia, and they're building, structures for government, bureaucracy. There are developments in architecture and in agriculture and in astronomy. They study the stars and they chart the movements of the stars, leading up to calendars. They're also developing cuneiform writing. And in general, it's a really dynamic civilization. On the other side, in the southwest of the imperial quadrant, you have the Egyptian Empire, which reaches from the delta on the Mediterranean all the way down till what today is like the southern part of Sudan, the whole Nile River Valley, and the empire covers that whole valley. And in general, it's more stable. It's not like in Mesopotamia. It's more stable, and there's a little bit less development, but still there's a lot of things going on. They're building art. They built the pyramids, different architecture. They have developed hieroglyphic writing, and there's developments in medicine. There are things going on here. In the north, we have the Hittite Empire, which goes from the capital, Hattusa, which is where Borgazoy near Ankara is today, in Turkey, which covers Asia Minor and goes down into Lebanon and Canaan. All this is part of the Hittite Empire, and their contributions are basically they develop iron working, so you could make better weapons, better chariots, and maybe better tools. So that's their contribution. Not that many contributions from the Hittites as far as science and culture, but it's a strong militaristic empire. These are the three empires, and during those 500 years that we're talking about. So what was the most important event and development that came out of that time which would impact the entire world and entire world history? What was the most important development that they did? What was it? Was the development of irrigation? What was it that they did had the strongest, most powerful effect on the world and on the history of the world? The answer is, objectively, if you think about it, the objective answer is, it's the arrival of Avram in Canaan and the birth of Yitzchak. This is the most important thing for the entire history of the world that happened during that period. Why is that? It's just a couple of people, a tiny family. Why is that? So the answer is because it can't be denied that the most powerful force that was ever introduced into the world is the Torah. The Torah, the whole world revolves around the Torah. The whole world revolves around the imperial quadrant, and the imperial quadrant is all about the Torah. It's Judaism, it's Christianity, it's Islam, it's the competition to the Torah, it's Greek, the Greek development of science, and science in the secular world, a lot of it is driven by trying to take away and to show that science provides the answer to what goes on in nature rather than God. So everything that goes on in the imperial quadrant, it's all about the Torah. Of course, you have the Muslims are fighting the Christians are persecuting the Jews. It's not only the Abrahamic faiths against the seculars. There's a lot of internecine fighting in each one, but it all comes down to one issue. The issue is, who is the central object of worship in the world? Is it God or is it man? This is the central issue of everything that goes on in the world. And this is the most powerful force. No matter what you say, you could argue against it, you could say whatever you like. But it is a fact that the Torah completely turned over the whole world. And when did the Torah start? The introduction of the Torah started at the point where Avram came to Canaan and he gave birth to Yitzchak. Why was this the process? Avram demonstrated his faith to God, and why didn't he give him the Torah? Because at that point, because the Torah could not be given to the world, because the world had showed itself that it constantly slipped back into paganism, and it could not be entrusted with the Torah. There had to be created a receptacle that would hold the Torah and that would guard it and preserve it. And that receptacle had to be a people. It had to be a nation. And a nation that was formed from its very beginning for the very purpose of being the receptacle of the Torah. That's what had to be. If Avram had come to Canaan with a family, with a wife and a couple of children, some grandchildren, a small clan of people would have come to Canaan, then those people could not have become that nation, because those people would have an identity. They would be somebody. They would be Syrians or whatever they are. They would have an identity, and then to give them the Torah and to make them the chosen people would be to superimpose the identity of Israel, the identity of the Jewish people, on top of an already existing identity which is there. And that would be a mechitza, it would be an interference. The identity has to be organic, it has to be visceral, it has to go down to the very people of what they are, and it has to go on to them from the very beginning. If they had another identity, then it would not work. So Avram came. He was an individual. There was no nation. They said, "I'll make you into a great nation," but you're not a nation. You're a person. When is the beginning of the building of the nation? When Yitzchak was born. When Yitzchak was born, there is now a family. There is a family, and this family is the beginning to be built, and this family will develop and develop and develop over a long period of time until it becomes a large nation, and it will already from the beginning be a nation that is devoted to God, that is whole raison d'etre, its own reason for existing, is to declare that there is one God and to be prepared to receive the Torah. This is what this nation is. And this nation had to be built like that from the bottom up. And that started with Yitzchak. Now, the bris ben absorim, the covenant that God made with Avram, he said to him, he told him first, he said, Ani Hashem, I am God who brought you forth from Ur Kasdim. I brought you forth from Ur through Haran down to Canaan to give you this land. But then he tells him later, he said to Avram, you should know that your children, your descendants, will be strangers in a land that doesn't belong to them, and they will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. The question is, how do you figure the 400 years? The count of the 400 years starts earlier, but they went down, they actually were there for 210 years. This is what he tells them. And then afterwards, I will punish their oppressors, and they will come out with honor and wealth, and they will take the land. And they'll go to get the Torah, of course. So, why does this have to be? Why did they have to go through hundreds of years of captivity in Egypt? Why? What was it necessary? Why? So the Gemara asked this question. Gemara in the Dorim, Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph says, Mipnei ma nenesh Avram Avinu v'nishtabdu banav l'Mitzrayim v'sayim v'eseh shana. Why was Avram punished? That his descendants had to be enslaved by the Egyptians for 210 years. The Gemara gives three answers, but I'll focus on one of them. They're not very different. They're all a similar type of answer. So the Gemara says, because he said, when in the beginning, when God told him that I am God who took you out of Egypt, out of Ur Kasdim, and brought you to Canaan, so Avram said, "V'ma eda ki ereshana." How will I know that I will inherit this land? And so God showed him a sign how he's going to know. But because he said this, that's why his descendants had to spend 200 years in Egypt. Now, how are we to understand this? First of all, I don't know how great a sin this was. His faith was he was very faithful. I'm sure he did not doubt God's word, but he needed some kind of a reassurance, something tangible that he could look at. But otherwise, it's just a promise. He wanted some kind of a reassurance. And that was a problem, that he had to have that reassurance. Okay, so if this was a very big sin, it was his sin. It was not the sin of his children. There was grandchildren, his great-great-great-grandchildren. It was not their sin. And children don't die aren't punished for the sins of their fathers unless they follow in the same way. But if they don't follow that way, then why were they punished? And why such a severe punishment? So he said that, fine. Avram was still like the tremendous righteous person. He was like, God talks to him, he said, I'm not going to keep any secrets from Avram, like in the next parsha. I'm so close to him, and he's a prophet and everything, and he said this. So what does this mean? So I think that the explanation is similar to what we were saying before. That the Torah had to be given to people. The nation, of course, right now was organized from the beginning for receiving the Torah. So that is their identity. But it had to be given to people that when they received the Torah, it would connect tight to them, like a magnet and a piece of metal. There's nothing in between, nothing, no separation. It would really be on the very deepest level that there would be a connection. It would become the very identity of the people would be that their connection to the Torah, their covenant, their receiving the Torah would be on the very deepest level would be their identity. And therefore, the problem was that you saw from Avram that even at his level, there was still a certain lack of self-abnegation. The Gemara says in Chulin, Daf Peites, that Moshe and Aaron, what they said was greater than what Avram said, because they said, Nachnu ma, what are we? We're nothing. We're nothing. Complete abnegation of self, complete bittul of what they are, complete. And Avram said, V'noichi offer ve'efer, I am dust and ashes. Dust and ashes is extremely low, but it's not nothing. And Avram was not able to reduce himself to nothing, and certainly his children, his grandchildren, descendants would not be any better. In fact, they were probably worse. So they would not be reduced to nothing. They would still have a certain sense of self which is separate from God. So imagine if they came to get the Torah, and they were farmers and businessmen and lawyers and soldiers and politicians and whatever they were, and they would come to Har Sinai to get the Torah. They would be wearing many garments. They would be wearing all kinds of layers on them. Of course, not the nation, of course, but all these individuals would be wearing garments upon garments upon garments, and they were standing there to receive the Torah, and the Torah would have to be superimposed over those garments. It would not work. It would not work. Therefore, they had to go into captivity in Egypt. They had to be reduced to raw people. Everything was taken away from them. Their property, their status, their honor, their dignity, their liberty, everything was taken away from them. They were reduced to raw human beings. And then when they came out of Egypt as raw human beings, even if they came out with some money, there was not enough time for them to develop garments out of that money. It was just something that they were carrying. They were still avodim. They were still slaves, raw people, stripped down to the minimum, stripped down to the soul. And they come to Har Sinai and they receive the Torah. Then that Torah would be connected to them on the deepest level, and it would be connected forever and ever, and all the garments that eventually through life they would put on top of themselves would not be between them and the Torah. It would be on top of this combination creature which is a Jew and the Torah. This will last forever. Thank you very much. I hope to see you next time.